I've been having an issue with the clutch in my G35 2003, and so I've already replaced this master cylinder once, and what I think was happening was I wasn't getting a good seal in here with the threads. So here's the end of the hard pipe that goes in there, and somehow there was some material in here or something. When I tried to tighten it down, it wasn't tightening down very well. It seemed like it was tight. It wasn't leaking any fluid or anything, but I just could never, I always had to press the clutch all the way to the floor in order to get it to disengage the transmission. So what I'm doing is I'm replacing the master cylinder because it's cheap, and I don't know if I messed up the threads in here. So I'm going to do the master cylinder again, and I'm actually going to take out, you can see that I've taken out all of the hard lines that go all the way down to the slave, and include this small piece of soft line that goes from the hard line to the actual slave cylinder. This I wasn't expecting to find. This is called the Clutch Orifice, and I had to do some research on it to figure out what the heck it is. Nothing in the service manual for the G35 say what this does. It just kind of mentions that it's there, and it basically sits in between the top hard line and the bottom hard line. I just thought it was one piece of hard line that went all the way down to the soft line that goes to the slave cylinder, but it's not. This is in the middle. It's actually located right there inside the wheel well. You have to take off, there's a plastic piece you have to take off right there, and then you can find the rest of the hard line. I was trying to find it just so I could take it out, and then right there is mounted this piece like that. So what I'm going to do is I think that I know a lot of G35, 370Z, 350Z owners complain about the clutch feel, and I'm guessing this has something to do with it. So I'm going to take this apart and figure out what's inside there. It's a 27 millimeter cap on here. Before I take it apart, this is a look down inside the top. So this is the top, and you can see there is a small hole in there. Basically, the term orifice just means that it's a restriction. Basically, it's a plate usually put in a fluid or gaseous line in order to either restrict the flow or to measure the flow. And there's nothing attached to this thing that would measure the flow, so the only thing I can think of is it restricts the flow, or something internal here has to do with the clutch or clutch feel. And so when I take it apart, we'll be able to see better. But you can see that the hole in the top and the bottom are basically, it looks actually like the hole in the top is smaller. That hole right in there looks to be smaller than a standard hole for a hard line. So that might be part of the restriction, or part of why it's called an orifice. Alright, so here's the inside of the orifice. It basically got a gasket around the top, or actually it's the bottom cap. Then there's some plastic pieces that go in here, and some springs. So there's a spring here around this cup. There's a little plastic cup in this spring, and then there's a small spring that fits inside of the bottom of that cup, and then that goes into, try to get a picture of it down in there. It's basically just a plate down at the bottom. So, what I gather is that the fluid comes in through the top here, causes these springs to move, and I guess it's more, I don't know, it seems to me like it would be meant to dampen both the fluid going through this, through to the clutch, and the fluid as it returns. So something with these springs dampen out the fluid motion as it's as fluid's flowing through each way, and that's the only thing I can really gather as to why it's there. It's probably just to make sure that the clutch feels the same all the time. Kind of by dampening it, you just remove all of the true feeling of the clutch, which people who actually drive don't want. I mean, you want to be able to feel what's going on with your foot as it's controlling the clutch and engaging the clutch, and how that is affecting the transmission. So to me, this seems like a part that can easily go away, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to remove it. I'm going to just put one single line. It's a braided line that goes from the master cylinder all the way, removing all these parts, to the slave, and that's it. I've seen other people on YouTube do it, and they say that the clutch feel is greatly improved by doing that. They didn't mention, however, what this does and why this is even there, and I don't know myself, but that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking it's there to make sure the clutch feels numb, basically. I can only imagine that this numbs the clutch feel and makes it kind of disconnected from your foot to the actual clutch. And you might want that in a luxury car, which the Infiniti is, but you don't necessarily want it in a sports car, which the 6-speed manual is kind of meant to be. So I'm going to take it out, and I'll let you know what it feels like afterwards. Here's the new master cylinder with the braided line connected. What I recommend you do is connect it before you put this into the engine bay. That way you can tighten down the connections. It's kind of tight in there when you're trying to make that connection, and tighten it all down with the wrench. So I pre-attached that, tightened it down. I also pre-attached the hose, or the line that goes from the reservoir. Then you feed the braided line down through that hole right there in the very bottom, underneath where you mount the master cylinder. The master cylinder gets mounted right to the wall there, the firewall. Then you just wedge the master cylinder down in there. It's kind of tight and finicky, but you can fit it in there. Put the piston through the hole and line up the bolts with their holes, and then push it through. Up in the wheel well, you can route the braided line through this area behind this plastic wheel well liner, and then route it underneath the car, and then prep the end by putting on the bolt that goes through, and the 2 crush washers that are copper. One thing I've decided to do is, since this braided line runs pretty close to the exhaust, I'm gonna use this sleeve, this insulating sleeve that I got off of the old rubber line that went to the slave cylinder, and I'm gonna just thread this over the braided line, and then I'm gonna zip tie it tight, just like the old one was. Alright, so that's what it looks like when the insulation's all on. Alright, here's the line all routed through and attached to the slave cylinder. You can see there's about 3 inches in between the braided line and this exhaust pipe. What I'm going to do is, once I get the plastic back installed here, I'm going to zip tie this line to the plastic so that it pulls it away a little bit more, so I'll have about maybe 5 inches of space in between that braided line and the exhaust. Here's that plastic piece that goes up in the wheel well, and what I've done is I've pre-drilled 2 holes right on the corner where it bends down. This sits up in there like this, and so on the inside bottom corner where the plastic bends, I just drill 2 holes, and then I'll route my zip tie through there to hold the braided line to the inside of this. When you're routing the clevis, which is right here, through the firewall, make sure that it seats itself around the clutch pedal, which is right here, and that way both sides of the clevis will be showing. You can see kind of straight through, and there's a hole in the clutch pedal that you'll mount the pin through. For the threads on the piston, you don't have to get them exact just now. You can modify it right now. Like, I have this nut that's behind the clevis is loose, and so I can reach up there with a set of needle nose pliers and twist that pin, or not the pin, but I can twist the piston rod, and the piston rod will spin, and then it will move the clevis out or in a little bit to align the hole in the clevis with the hole in the clutch pedal. Then you tighten down that nut on the back of the clevis, and make sure you put the pin through with the cotter pin. Let's see if I can get a picture. There it is. And tighten down the bolts. Here, there's 2, what are they, 12mm nuts that hold on to the master cylinder. Actually, I tightened those down before I started messing with the clevis. So do that, so that way your master cylinder is sitting in the proper position. It's pulled all the way to the firewall, and then for you're modifying or you're adjusting the clevis pin correctly, and it won't be out of whack once you tighten down those 2 bolts or 2 nuts. Okay, once I got all of the the braided line tightened down the bottom, and of course I tightened it at the top before I even installed it, then I attach, this is how I bleed the clutch. So I've got a tube here attached to the bleed screw down the bottom, and it goes all the way up into the reservoir. I just zip tied it right here to make sure that it doesn't fall out, and basically that will it just makes a big circuit, so the fluid will go all the way around, and I'll just keep on pressing the clutch pedal until I see no more bubbles. I'm pressing the clutch pedal with my hand, And as you can see, the bubbles are flowing through into the reservoir, and every so often just make sure you top up the reservoir so that it doesn't get all drained of fluid. In order to get a lot of the bubbles out of the master cylinder, just pump it firmly and quickly several times. And then proceed to just press it all the way down nice and slow, and you'll see a lot more bubbles come through the line and into the reservoir. Once you don't see any more air bubbles, you just tighten down the bleed screw. You take off the hose or the line that was performing the bleed and drain it, throw away that old brake fluid, and then you're done. Put the cap on the top, make sure it's level at the high mark, and go take it for a test drive.